would just start talking and something like I've written down would come out.
Speak up a bit.
And but yeah, it would be maybe a bit difficult to follow. So I decided to write it down for you to get it, not miss the point. So the universe exploded exponentially out of one point, and if you pay a little attention, you can see this cataclysmic event is still taking place. Looking through telescopes and microscopes, our most gifted code breakers spare no effort to try and solve this mystery, paying no attention to the kaleidoscope of everyday life, where events unfold everywhere and at any moment. Some of these events pass by and cross your field of sensorial awareness at their peaks, ready to implode or explode. A string of collisions in the past manipulated its sum of energy and direction, so that it would be triggered at that specific moment when the right circumstances arise. During the trip that led to the events unfolding, many features of other events and places were absorbed and rejected, sculpting its future form. You can see potential events passing by during build-up time, accumulating and rejecting while being less noticeable, because it did not find its final shape. The only way we can see the origin of the universe is through observing how it is still working while we are part of it. And unlike people who cut up the world in workable pieces in order to reach fixed goals, the universe takes into account the journey. Nature thrives on itself, eating the dead and killing the living, while spontaneously growing and decaying. The nature of humankind is also thriving on itself. We made it, in fact, the core of our being. It seems that we produce anti-nature and organize ourselves in a square world so we can discern and control the way we are. Cutting off the origin of events at the edge of the window frame, passers-by lose their source and destination outside the time it took to cross this stretch of glass. We lifted our feet from the ground via shoes, roads and cars, while houses isolate and shape our thoughts and movements. Chairs, tables, desks and closets replaced the trees and grass, while screens, signs and advertisements carry the weight of the world in preset gestures and poses. Logogrammic code, or the alphabet, affirms the truth installed during infancy. As we talk about the weather, to attach ourselves to the elements we hide. When we talk about the weather, to attach ourselves to the elements we hide from, in an attempt to reconnect the remainder of a pointless conversation. As nomads, we traveled from the giant encasement of a blind explosion through density of potential, jumping rocks that would form galaxies, with the will to travel to that one place growing inside a conscious shell of destiny. We landed and transformed as the lands transformed with us. The skies grew denser and dove into the shape of a sea, leaving us the plain that was round and an air that would unite all our endeavors. Before we grew, we shrank, and then we decided to dominate, to superimpose our own world on top of the one we picked. We had been looking too much at ourselves, wanting to thrive and memorize mistakes, avoiding collisions, and invent new ways to entertain the emptiness after all had been discovered, fixing our homes and destinations. When we lose our way and ask for direction, following the pointed finger and failing to notice our paths, to notice other paths, we go to the place we wanted to go before we started. Ignoring the complete journey while in a car to work is the only rejection that takes place while settling for the achievement. At that moment the game is lost. When we reach our goal, for a game implies interaction at any moment and at any junction. The blueprint for our existence was not written beforehand, it is being written on the go. The journey is an essential part of the blueprint. So if you ask me to talk about pointlessness, I get lost in the amount of things we have been piling up on top of our uplifted abstraction. It is not about these things, it is about this framework, this giant plan or destination that is ignoring the journey. And yeah, if you would start a sentence and use no interruptions, then you would be still talking in the same sentence, and you would call that the universe. And I think it's really difficult to pinpoint what is pointless. So I just started writing this, and that's what came out. But I think everybody is in its own journey and has its own influences. Yeah.
It's 5 to 10 minute talks. So, what were your starting points for thinking about this text?
Starting points.
Yeah. References, influences.
Yeah. It's a bit difficult to. Yeah. I hope I explained it a little bit, but where I ended, that's why I started thinking about it. And there's so many things that are completely fabricated, and that everybody uses to survive, or to maintain themselves in a world where everything is preset. And I also wrote my thesis about a bit of the cutting up of the world in sentences. So I started to compare roads with letters. So if you travel to your destination on a road, it's like traveling to an idea or a realization on letters. So letters are the fuel of the mind, and as long as you're reading, there's a build-up of potential in your brain, and the way your engine has been optimized to decipher and decode these connections, that's also the speed in which you can comprehend and reassemble things. So our mental world is highly connected to our physical world, and it's a bit difficult to cut it loose and to have a clear, well, for me at least, to see things loose from each other. So if I start thinking about one thing, immediately there's 10 surrounding things that seem even more pointless, or so. Yeah, it's difficult to say where this one starting point was.
Pointlessness leading to pointlessness.
Yeah, but also there's this vast meaning around it that, in my opinion, is being ignored by a lot of people. Yeah, so this.
Do you think the concept of serendipity is any way related to what you just said?
Serendipity, I think it's I think it's a bit of a more fashion word. I don't think it's really something. I would say then. Well, I don't have a clear feeling with serendipity. I think it's composed out of different elements. But it has a relation, yeah.
The idea of a sentence that never ends being what you would call a universe, it's sort of reminiscent of, I'm saying this because I listened to a BBC show about this recently, the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, the bit about the hand that writes and never unwrites. I can't remember the quote, but it's a famous line about the hand that writes, and The idea that, yeah, if there is a hand that writes, it not only never unwrites it, it should never stop any particular piece of writing, because it's writing the entire universe.
Yeah.
It's not just its individuated parts.
But that's also connected to this. There's this in old mythology that if Zeus or God would return to Earth, then he would be impotent because he would be part of its creation. And I think somewhere I read it was about studies about indigenous tribes, and when they were seeing for the first time, when they were looking at the movies at the screen, they were constantly wondering what was happening to the guy that was walking out of the frame. And I think these types, or the people who are closer to nature, don't see it, the possibility of cutting the world up and that it would end. And I think that's also a bit of my nature, and that's why I try to put it in words, but I get also a bit lost in trying to make a point there.